Alright, servicing the 2005 Lincoln Aviator. This is Wise Guy, and today I'm going to get straight to the point and show you how I carry out the step-by-step procedure from Ford on the removal and installation process of the water pump on this vehicle. It's a very common service to perform. I'm not going to be installing a new thermostat, but if you wanted to pause it here, you can get some information about what's involved with that as I move forward to the water pump section. However, step one, drain the cooling system. That's going to be the first thing I'm not going to do. I don't want to make a mess before crawling under there. So step two, remove the cooling fan. Well, that's easier said than done. And after that, we're going to remove the upper fan shroud. So back to step two, refer to the fan clutch section. Where is that at? Here it is. So basically the fan and fan clutch need to be removed, but it's surrounded by a plastic protective housing called the Shroud. And we see that at some point we're going to have to rent some specialty tools from the auto parts store. But step one is to remove the lower shroud, and there's just a couple 10mm bolts down here. Well, it's already wet and soaking. This is something that I notice to do is remove these two 8mm bolts holding up this power steering radiator or cooler here, so the lower shroud, doesn't ding into yours and make it look like mine. So I've already gone down here, and here's the lower shroud protecting the clutch fan. I've already removed the two, 10mm bolts, and basically just got to kind of work this thing out. You want to watch out for this power steering hose. Just kind of move it out of the way so the shroud can come down, and it just clips into the upper shroud on both sides, so I just want to remove that. And you can see it's definitely leaking once again. So it's coming on out. Pretty difficult to do with one hand. See, it's getting hung up on this little clip on this power steering hose there. This is what I don't want to happen, is have this rubbing up against this cooler here for the power steering. There's the drain for the radiator. We're going to do that in a little bit here. So anyway, we got the lower housing off, and we'll pop up oh boy. And all this protective plastic that pops off. Get this stuff out of the way. And what we'll end up doing after we remove the clutch fan, this is the upper shroud, we'll remove that, which will involve, loosening up the upper radiator hose. Yours may look different. I've changed the clamp here, but here's the Degas bottle that I'm talking about. There's a couple, 10mm here, and a third is under the upper radiator hose. That's why we want to remove that out of the way. So, back to the instructions here. We're going to end up, I guess we're at the point where we need to rent a tool. So I need to go to the automotive store tomorrow and rent those. But basically, you need a specialty wrench to get onto the fan clutch bolt. And you can't just simply loosen that bolt because the water pump pulley here will spin as you're trying to loosen that bolt. So this specialty tool here, this real wide wrench here, that's going to secure over these two bolts, any two of the four bolts on the coolant pulley there, to prevent it from spinning. And then this is the pulley, and that's the two bolts there. Any two of them has that pulley spin you'll support with that specialty tool. So that's where we're at here. And then, you know, we'll go ahead and loosen these bolts on the Degas ball, get that out of the way. And, you know, we got a few more 10 millimeter bolts on the upper shroud. That'll all come out after that fan is removed. So, go. I guess this is a good enough time as any to make a mess and remove the fluid out of the radiator. So where is that? Here we go. And you probably notice I got my two pitties here with me, and you got to really be careful with engine coolant around dogs, as it's really sweet and they're attracted to it, and you know, that can be lethal if they drink that. So definitely want to be cautious there. We'll come up to the top deck here and relieve the pressure on the Degas bottle. That'll make it really pour on out. All right, slowly but surely. No. Yeah, see, they already sense it. All right, so we'll pick back up on this when I get back from the auto parts store. All right, back at it, ready to knock this out. There was a little change of plans. I ended up just purchasing the tool from AutoZone instead of renting it. They had a forward fan clutch wrench set removal tool from OEM Tools. It was $22. That's what it looks like there. Just a long 36 millimeter fan clutch wrench and a large crow's foot. Should resemble the instructions here. There we go. And I ended up over at Summit Racing, and I purchased their Serpentine belt removal tool. And that's just a real long, thin extension for this crow's foot. That's going to make things a lot easier for me. And in reality, we're going to end up removing the Serpentine belt anyway, so what the hell. So this has got an extension on it. There we go. And that's going to give us a lot of leverage. Could you imagine doing that by hand with that, you know, short handle it comes with? So a real tight area here. We're going to try to get some good lighting. And that water pump pulley, gosh, you can see how tight it is. That's why you need this really thin wrench here. So that crow's foot goes right over the two bolts, and you can see I made a right angle with this Serpentine belt wrench and have it just resting against that air filter housing. And then we can lengthen this 36 millimeter wrench with a I don't know, a breaker bar or something. So there we go. And back to the instructions here. The large clutch assembly nut has a right-handed thread, so it needs to be rotated counterclockwise to remove it. So there we go. Now I'm going to really have some leverage on both of these. I imagine this is going to come right off instead of fighting with it all day. So we got other things to do. Look at that. Came right off. Made it look easy with all that leverage. And then we'll jump underneath the car here, try to get a good angle of the fan coming out. We want to remove it from down below. Definitely rather than from up top, because it's going to drop with the weight, and don't want to take out that cooler on the power steering. And this part's always a pleasure. But it's much harder putting the fan back on than taking it off, so definitely don't want it to drop down here on your face. Just spin the fan and down she comes. There we go. And this is why I loosened this cooler here. Give me some room to work with. Back to the instructions. So got the fan off, lower shrouds off. All right, back to the beginning here. Okay, remove the cooling fan. Step 3, remove the upper shroud. So I did go up here and I removed all the bolts on the Degas bottle and the upper shroud. Loosen up this upper radiator hose, get that out of the way, hopefully. Oh, still has some fluid in there. Now we have some room to work with. There we go. So now, there's the water pump pulley. Now we have so much room to work with. Get that water pump out. And on the pulley itself, a couple 10mm bolts. So I ended up just using the crow's foot after all. Keep that from spinning. And now that the water pump pulley is off, you know, the actual serpentine belt removal tool was too long, so I just put my breaker bar on the pulley, the tensioner pulley here. And I always take a picture of the pattern of the belt before I do this. But anyway, loosen that up. Everything's harder with one hand. Anyway, just getting this belt out of the way, and now the pulley can come off, and lo and behold, there's the water pump, just a few bolts. We'll get that removed and get the new one on and resume filming from there. Looks like the water pump has 4 13mm bolts, a 3 on the top and 1 on the bottom. I've gone ahead and removed the 3 on the top, and then down there's the 4th on the bottom. And this is Summit's water pump made by GMB. I have tried Napa's water pump. That's actually the one I'm removing right now. That one failed. And at the same time of installing that, I did replace the fan clutch as well. just in case that's what's causing the pump to continue to keep failing. But it just looks like it's overall bad impeller on the design itself. I've tried O'Reilly's water pump as well, AutoZone's. So last but not least, we're going to do Summit's. Pretty standard looking water pump. So this should just pull on out. Hopefully that catches the majority of it. So I'm going to clean this up, get the new one installed, maybe show how that serpentine belt goes back on. Luckily I took some pictures and that should go on quite easy. I'll also put the fan back on so you can see the struggle that's involved with that. But after that, I'll probably just cut to having the shroud all put back together and show you how to bleed the system and fill it up with coolant again. So we'll be back. Factory torque specs for the water pump 4 bolts is 18 foot-pounds. Okay, 18 foot-pounds. So it doesn't take much to set this new water pump. We're looking at 18 foot-pounds on the water pump pulley 4 bolts as well. You should take a quick look at your serpentine belt, make sure there's no cracks running along the rivets of the belt. I know this is relatively new belt, so I'm not too concerned about it. And I normally put the belt on before I torque it down, but I'm going to utilize this crow's foot, keep the pulley from spinning. So again, doesn't take much torque to tighten this down. Oh, come on. And just sort of work the serpentine belt around the pulleys, same way you took it off. Kind of crazy configuration here. I'll just get a loop and push it through this last pulley down by the tensioner. the tensioner just to get slack around the last pulley. And voila. I'll take a quick look at the photo I took earlier, make sure I didn't go around the wrong direction, because that's easy to do. And then I'll show you my struggle putting the fan back on, and then we'll bleed out the system and wrap it up. Now that the upper shroud is attached, I tightened down all the 10mm bolts on the Degas bottle, as well as the upper shroud, reattached my upper radiator hose, the overflow tube off the Degas bottle, and now it's time to get under the car and reinstall the fan and fan clutch. That's the most miserable part of this whole job, because it's been going relatively easy and smooth for the majority of this service that we're doing. So definitely want to wear eye protection. You're going to have some, dust and debris, and maybe even a little bit of fluid coming down into your eye, so you want to just be cautious of that. So the idea is when the fan is spinning, it tightens itself, so I don't really worry about torquing it down too much once we get it installed. But you need to have one hand hold the nut in place while the other hand spins the fan. This is always a pleasure. Wow, I made it look fairly easy there. Just had to keep that nut nice and flush, try to prevent it from wobbling so it can start threading. It wouldn't even hurt to have an extra body on top to stabilize the fan while you're threading it back onto the water pump pulley. Well, after 5 minutes of looking for the crow's foot, I completely forgot that I dropped it under the car after I removed the water pump. Now I have the reverse process to what I did earlier. I have a right angle coming off the crow's foot attached to the water pump pulley, stabilizing the 2 bolts there so it doesn't spin as I tighten it down, and having it come over to the driver's side, resting it against the battery. So as I tighten it down, it keeps that Serpentine belt removal tool stable. Now again, this real thin 36mm fan clutch wrench. I'm not even really too concerned about this, because as this fan spins, it tightens this down naturally. So some things worth mentioning that I noticed when I was filling up the rear heater core was that I removed the crossover fill tube plug, which I was under the impression I had already done back when I was draining the coolant system from the radiator, and that probably explains why it drained out so slowly. Next is when I was filling up the rear heater core supply hose, I noticed that I had only filled it with a liter of coolant. And actually backing up, another important thing worth mentioning, I wasn't even filming. Apparently I was just trying to get things done and forgot I was trying to film the whole process. But the mistake pans out because I'll be able to pick up where the mistake was done and reenact and show what was supposed to be done. And so we'll look at the procedure here from Ford, filling up the rear heater core. The first step is to remove the pressure relief cap off the Degas bottle. We've done that, and prepare to fill the rear heater core. Remove the engine crossover fill plug, which is what I just mentioned I had done already. Disconnect the heater supply hose from the engine crossover tube. So coming off the Degas bottle, here's the crossover fill tube, and coming out here, this will be the heater core supply hose. And this comes down, and this is why this probably looks different. I have, just to catch us up here, remove the air filter compartment, which isn't really a necessary step, but that is going to allow better visibility for filming and be able to demonstrate this process a little better. But the heater supply hose comes down, and see, it tees off and goes down to the rear heater core, but continues over for step one here and ends up coming back up. And we're gonna, let me free up my hands, clamp that off. So when the coolant comes in, it doesn't work its way up the front heater core. It'll just follow gravity on down and fill up the rear heater core, which needs 2 liters of coolant. So I have already filled it up with 1 liter, and then have since clamped off the rear hose and added another liter. There we go, that's pinched off. Added another liter to the front heater core, which when I unclamped it, it probably worked its way back down and ended up filling up the rear. But we'll see what happened there. So following the steps here, we're going to raise the heater supply hose to its maximum elevation, and using a funnel, slowly pour approximately 2 liters of coolant. So this is an approximation. It's not extremely important to get the exact amount in it. The main idea is just to get the air out of the lines here. So just going to try to catch us up here. Remove the fitting on the heater supply hose. And we'll see how much coolant it takes, but I do have it clamped off so it doesn't work its way up the front heater core. And I have a funnel here that holds a liter. And again, I've already filled a liter, and the next liter that I filled for the front heater core probably worked its way back down. So I won't be surprised if this doesn't take much for the rear heater core. And of course, this takes the premium gold. I use this Geo5 formula. This is heavy. It's hard to get a grasp on. So we'll see if it takes the entire amount.
Now, there is one more thing. What? Have you heard of stem cell research?
I've heard of it on the news, but I don't know what it is.
So we're trying to fill
Stem cells might be used to fight cancer.
as much as possible here and get the air out of the lines. But what will end up happening is, I'll fill these heater cores and then reconnect the heater supply hose and put the funnel up on the crossover fill tube and kind of top off. So I did, it took another liter. I'm just going to get a better camera angle here. So I removed, after adding another liter, I removed the clamp off the front heater core hose. And anyway, back to instructions here. Yeah, we did the 2 liters. I removed the clamp, and I want you to reconnect everything, but we're going to skip that because we're going to go right back to front heater core procedure, which has you remove all that crap again. And back to the instructions. So, you know, here's the heater supply hose that I was filling at, and it came over and teed off, and that's where I, well, right over here, that's where I clamped it the first time. And on the procedure for the rear, as it tees down, we'll clamp it off right down here. So again, here it is coming on down. It's kind of hard to see, but it tees off down here. And anyway, right about there, let me free up my hands here. Not the best camera angle. Maybe I could lift it up to you. Anyway, just down here a bit. So as gravity has fed all that coolant down through the bottom tube here, we'll clamp it off down here and hopefully be able to top off the rest of the heater supply hose to the top heater core. So that's what we've done here. It tees off and clamps down. Make sure this valve is closed. And again, earlier I already added a liter, so we'll see if it takes the rest of this. And just slowly letting it fill up the rest of the way. Hopefully it takes it all. And I know I'm kind of jumping around filming, but worth mentioning, I did end up underneath the vehicle again. Prettied up the... So I had a few issues filming, and I did capture the majority of the process, so I'm comfortable. Don't really have any choice but to recap where I'm at now. I've removed the clamp off the lower heater supply hose and reattached it to the crossover fill tube. Tighten it down with my wing nut clamp. And put the funnel on the crossover fill tube, filled it up with, gosh, at least 3 or 4 more liters, keeping an eye on the Degas bottle, trying to fill up to the cold fill line. I did go a bit above that. But as I backed the vehicle out and run the motor at 2,000 RPMs or so, that thermostat will open and let the coolant move and cycle through the rest of the motor. And when it cools down, you know, there'll be some air in the lines, and I'll take that crossover fill tube back off, put the funnel back on, and fill it up until I get the remainder of the air out of the lines and top it off with coolant. And I'll probably end up doing that a few times as I drive around and get home and let the motor cool down. Pop it off and just try to keep topping it off. And at the very end, I'll put a little anti-seize on that crossover fill tube plug, as it's known to get hot and seize up. I know I'm jumping around a bit, but before I even started filling up the heater core with coolant, I did reattach the 8mm bolts on that power steering cooler. The lower shroud is reattached, a few 10mm bolts, and it kind of clipped into that top shroud. So I think that's about it. I'll get the air filter compartment reconnected, plug in those few tubes and wiring harnesses, and we'll be back. Okay, so we don't want to open the cooling system while the engine is hot or running. The heater cores must be bled in the sequence presented or damage can occur. I've started the engine, I've set the defrost mode. If at any point it overheats, we're going to turn it off and carry out the bleeding procedure again for the heater cores. I'm going to run the vehicle at 2,000 RPMs for about 10 to 15 minutes, and there should be an indication of the thermostat opening when the degas bottle level drops. And at that point, run the vehicle for additional 2 minutes with the heat on maximum. We will check back. Okay, so an issue that's occurring seems to happen every time at this part of the procedure, and that is that I've warmed the motor up to the normal operating temperature, and it is not overheating or anything, but the degas bottle has not dropped in coolant level. In fact, it's risen, and the cabin is very hot from heat coming out of the defrost. So what ends up happening is I'll drive around the neighborhood for a bit, and right as it appears that the vehicle is going to overheat, the temperature will drop drastically out of nowhere, indicating that the thermostat finally opens up. So, you know, it seems like it's... I apologize. Once again, I had some camera issues. I don't know what's going on, but what I'm trying to explain is the only thing I could think of that would make this occur is that there's air in the lines or the thermostat is sticking, but I've had this happen even when I did this procedure and I installed a brand new thermostat, so I do feel it's the air in the lines. But I got home, I turned the motor off, and checked on the vehicle later in the night, and the degas bottle level did drop tremendously, and I opened up the fill plug and topped the coolant off to the cold fill line again and put some anti-seize on the plug and buttoned it all up. I don't really drive this vehicle much anymore. I take it out once in a while to tow or plow through some snow, but this is a known issue on the 2005 Lincoln Aviator and similar model Mountaineers and Explorers. And again, this is the 4th brand of water pump I've used, so if it continues to occur, I'll have to think about the best course of action to take at that point. It may be just driving this thing off a cliff. I don't know. So this is Wise Guy. Thanks for watching.